Maclain joins the show. It's great to have you on, man. Congratulations on this thing finally coming out. We've been hearing rumblings about it in Hollywood for a long time. How do you feel that we're on the verge of Untold finally being shared with the world?
It's exciting. It has. I feel like that is if we have like any rumors about our show, it's always that, which is like, man, this is still the same one you guys are working on. It's like, yeah, man, still the same one. But no, we are like unbelievably thrilled and excited to finally get these out. Can't wait for Tuesday for our Malice in the Palace episode to drop. It's going to be fun.
I remember we first connected at Sundance for the Battered Bastards of Baseball.
That's right.
And then you went on and did this incredible series, Wild Wild Country, which is just so fascinating. And then now you have this project. And honestly, it was kind of like the Great White Whale, this idea of, the Way brothers are doing this sports thing with Netflix. And nobody really knew what it was. Everybody was fans of your previous work. But what was it about this series? What was it about this approach to having multiple stories that really grabbed you and inspired you as a filmmaker?
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of nailed it. You know, our first doc was on a Netflix documentary on a minor league baseball team called the Portland Mavericks that my grandfather had owned. And that was really our debut documentary and our first documentary. And then we kind of right after that jumped headfirst into something that was like 180 degrees in the different direction. You know, the Rajneeshpuram story of this cult that had built this $100 million utopian city in Oregon and kind of ignited warfare out there. And then once that came out, you know, we had like a lot of options. I think like truthfully, we were probably pitched like every cult story under the sun. So after a while, that kind of our eyes started to glaze over a bit. But sports is just like, we're huge fans of sports documentary. We're huge sports fans ourselves. I was a very mediocre left-handed baseball pitcher that topped out at like 78 miles an hour. So maybe there was some wish fulfillment on my part to get to talk to real professional athletes and work with them. And Netflix was a great partnership. Like basically we started out with our Marty Fish documentary, but ultimately just expanded it into five sports documentary films. This is volume 1. And we wanted to kind of make a big play, a big splash in sports docs and see if we can add something to the conversation.
Maclain Way joins the show, the Emmy-winning producer and director, part of this new series Untold for Netflix. Ben Lyons in for Rich on the Rich Eisen Show. Our super producer, Chris Brockman, has a Marty Fish connection.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. Marty Fish, as you know, phenomenal golfer in addition to being an accomplished tennis player. Played in a charity tournament with Marty a couple years ago. He single-handedly led us to first place, which won us a free travel bag.
That's awesome. My first Marty Fish story is that I was like, all right, let's meet up. And he's like, great, let's go to Katsua in Brentwood. He's like, I eat lunch there every day. And I was like, all right, maybe he's being like a little hyperbolic. But like we go in and the place isn't even open. It feels like they've like specifically opened it for him. And he gets to order the Marty Fish roll. He has his own sushi roll named after him at that Katsua. I was pretty blown away. But he's just been an unbelievably fun guy to work with. Our connection with him is like weirdly one of our best buddies from high school is the American tennis player Sam Querrey, and we don't talk about this often, but we were embarrassingly a part of the Samurai, which was Sam Querrey's fan group. We would follow Sam around at tennis tournaments and cause a bunch of problems, and we had a lot of ruckus. But we got to know Marty a bit there, and we're super excited to partner up with him on this one.
Maclain joins the show. I was saying before you jumped on, I had a chance to watch the Malice at the Palace one, and I love documentaries that I think going into them, I know everything about it. I remember watching it live. I know Ron Artest. I've talked to Steven Jackson about this. I'm a basketball historian. I know this. But you're able to show us different sides of these men, different sides of this story that I found myself just connected to it in a completely different way. What was it about this story that obviously inspired you as a filmmaker, but what challenges were there when you knew there were guys in the audience like me who were like, wait a minute, I know everything about this already?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. And like ultimately, I think it came down to a couple things. One was just like our faith. It's similarly, like I remember when Malice in the Palace happened, it's one of the few sports events that you can kind of share those stories about with other people about where you were and what you were doing when it all happened. But really, it started with our conversations with Jermaine O'Neal, you know, who really had wanted to do something on this for years. And it's really kind of where the theme of Untold came from. And I feel like the subtext to Untold is it's not necessarily that these sports stories haven't been covered. Like they've been covered and talked about for sure, but at least talking to Jermaine and having faith in him and Ron and Steven Jackson that they hadn't been told through like their POVs, like their perspective. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we did these as puff pieces or anything, but we definitely tried to like edit, score, put the audience on the journey through like their lens. And that's ultimately what I'm super proud about. I think the other thing that just drew us to this is just like the unaired footage we were able to get. We were luckily filed a Freedom of Information Act with like the Auburn Hills Police Department, and they had all these camera angles that were like fascinating and things that I had never seen on YouTube, and it was good quality. And at that point, we felt like, all right, we have like some pretty awesome unaired footage that's never been seen. We have these great characters who are willing to be like raw, uncensored, vulnerable. Sometimes, like at times they admit fault, but at times they feel like a lot of blame got put on them as well. And we felt like, all right, we have enough magic here to go make something special.
Maclain joins the show. Untold, the new documentary series on Netflix, premieres next week, finally, after many years in the works. You hear rumblings about it in Hollywood for a long time. Oh, the Wayans brothers, they're working on this cool new Untold thing. Now it's finally coming out. One of the stories centers on Kaitlyn Jenner, and I would imagine it's a challenge as a filmmaker with a subject like that to put the story to bed, because I feel like she's in the news, continuing to make news every week now. What was it about her story that you really wanted to kind of shine a light on? Because there's obviously so much there when you're talking about Kaitlyn Jenner.
Yeah, the interesting about Kaitlyn is like she's one of the few, iconic celebrities, I think, in our country where different generations have so many different, I don't know if opinions is the right word, but just different, a different contextualization for her. For someone like my father or my mother, like they remember Kaitlyn at 1976 Montreal games, destroying the decathlon over 48 hours, breaking the world record, winning gold. And then I think for like our generation, like honestly, like it was more of a keeping up with the Kardashians, like reality TV star. Like I think I had some understanding of what she accomplished at the games, but didn't really have a full, idea of what that story was. And then similarly to Malice, I mean, it's not the most exciting answer in the world, but ultimately, like we went to the IOC, the Olympic Committee, and they just had like 30 hours of like this pristine 16 millimeter film following Jenner around at the games. We approached Kaitlyn and talked to her, and she kind of expressed, a similar thing to what I had talked about, which is like for the idea for her to go back and talk about the blood, sweat, and tears and her athletic performance and what she did to win gold with our footage felt like, man, this is a great opportunity to kind of almost recontextualize one of the most famous people in our country's origin story, so to speak.
Maclain joins the show. The series is Untold. Ben Lyons in for Rich on the Rich Eisen Show. One of the 5 that are coming out in this first bundle, you had a chance to direct along with Chapman, called Crime and Penalties. Tell me about this one.
This one is one of our favorites. I say it with a smile on my face and a giggle in my voice because tonally it's different. I think it's probably the most like comical documentary we've ever made, which it can be tough to pull those off. But it's essentially about a man named Jimmy Galante, who was a huge waist hauling figure on the East Coast. Rumors abound that Tony Soprano was based off of him, and he has this son named AJ, similar to the show. And AJ was this high school obsessed hockey player. And in the last game of his high school career, he rips his knee, tears his ACL, and can never play hockey again. And so what does Jimmy, his father, do? He buys him a minor league hockey team in the United Hockey League. Of course, they're called the Danbury Trashers because of Jimmy's waste hauling business. And he instills his 17-year-old son, AJ, as the president and general manager. And it's usually at that point that I like to say, and madness ensues. They were the self-titled bad boys of hockey. They basically stacked their team with bruisers and bullies and enforcers, and they just violently beat up on teams and won games. And I don't want to give away the ending of the doc too much, but the federal government comes in, gets involved, and ultimately the team is disbanded by the federal government, which I don't think has happened too often in professional sports. So for us, it was just too good of a story, and these characters and guys were just too fun too much fun not to work with.
Corruption, the federal government, hockey. You've got Mike Del Tufo's $10. He's in. I'm in. Del Tufo's all in. The Battered Bastards of Baseball is one of my favorite sports docs in recent memories. I mentioned that we connected out at Sundance when you guys premiered the film. It's been a few years now. Has there been talks of maybe a scripted version of the story? I feel like it's so ripe for a continuation of this world because it's really a unique time in baseball history.
Oh, man, I'd be the first one to buy a ticket and go see it. I would love for a scripted remake of Battered Bastards. Exactly like you said. I love those characters. I love that setting, Northwest 1970s, the ballparks that these guys would play in. They take a bus to these games, and they ultimately just kind of live their dream on like a low level of professional baseball with really out any dreams or illusions that they would make it to the big leagues, but they still find a lot of happiness. I would love to see it get made. Out of Sundance, we had partnered with a company that had bought the scripted rights and tried to get into development. It's crazy. We're in the documentary world, and I think like 90% of the reason why we're in that world is because we can just go get our cameras, go call up people, go find interviews, go get archive footage, and we can make these things. Scripted world's a lot more pieces to navigate there, but at the end of the day, we'd love to see that get made.
Last thing I'll leave you with, you mentioned the idea of, as a documentary filmmaker, feeling empowered where you don't need to play the Hollywood game. You can just go out there and shoot something. Now that you've immersed yourself in the world of sports, this 5-part series makes its debut next week. Another 5 episodes to come, hopefully by the end of the year or very soon. Are you trying to do something completely out of sports next, or are you now fully engulfed in the world of sports storytelling? Do you see that for your next project as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that we chase the stories first. I do think with Untold, we're really excited to hopefully build something here that splashes in and that people dive into and watch. And super excited about Volume 1 and Volume 2. And as long as it works for Netflix, we'll keep making these for definitely a long time. Definitely with the first 5 and still working on it today. We're very hands-on. We had a great team of collaborators, directors and editors and producers that really all pulled these together. But yeah, no, I think we're excited to still keep our hand in this little sports industry, but hopefully also find other stories that need to be told, because we would be always really excited to go do that as well.
As someone who's a fan of your work and just a fan of the genre of sports storytelling, I'm so excited for this to finally be coming out after all these years. So congratulations, and we appreciate you taking some time, man.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Maclain joining the show, part of the team behind Untold.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.